Train Depot, and we have 4 people here. There's nobody actually in the public that is in attendance yet. We are also on Zoom, and you can join the Zoom. There's a link on the agenda. And so with that, let's have roll call, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, we can't hear you, Carol. At least in the depot.
We can hear you on Zoom.
Okay, I can hear you now.
There you go. And I'm here.
Okay. This was a exercise in futility today. So how far did we get into the meeting? I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
We're just
That's okay.
wrapping up.
We just wrapped it up? I get to go home?
Let's start roll call again, please.
Okay. Chairperson Jan Clark-Kretz.
Here.
Bonnie London. Tim Underko.
Here.
AJ Moyer. Beth Cohen.
Here.
Randy Elder.
He's here.
Jean Wilson.
Here.
Auxiliary member Ramona Brockman.
Here.
And Greg Obranovich.
Here.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you. Now committee comment for items not on the agenda. Does anybody on our committee have anything they'd like to discuss not on the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, and I don't see any public members. Is that right?
We have one member of the public attending via Zoom.
And, okay. All right, so at this point, I would like to ask for an adoption of the agenda.
Motion to adopt the agenda. Underco.
Second, Wilson.
Okay, roll call, please.
Okay, Jan Clark-Kretz.
Yes.
Tim Underko.
Yes.
Beth Cohen.
Yes.
Randy Elder.
He said yes.
Jean Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to public comment on consent agenda. Is there any comment on our consent agenda? Hearing and seeing none, now we would need a motion to accept the consent agenda. Randy made a motion. Do we have a second?
Second, Underco.
Roll call, please.
Okay, Jan Clark-Kretz.
Yes.
Tim Underko.
Aye.
Beth Cohen.
Yes.
Randy Elder.
He said yes.
Jean Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to roll right into then committee matters, and I'll pass it off to Mary Beth.
Yes, good evening, and thank you everybody for participating this evening. As you may know, this is a continuation of our January 8th meeting, and we are scheduled for 3 hours tonight. So we hope to tackle some major things and hopefully get through the glossary. So we'll see how far we get, but thank you all for your commitment to this committee. I will introduce you to Mark Teague from PlaceWorks. He is your technical staff on this element, on this matter, and take it away, Mark.
Thank you, Mary Beth. And based on comments from the committee at the last meeting, we have redone the definitions to help demonstrate where changes were made and how things can go so that we can talk this through and hopefully get approval to put these in the plan. So a lot of this can already be found on the town's website under the settings section, along with a lot of comments from the various reviewers that reviewed the original document as to why the changes are there, and we can certainly go over some of these. The reason, and I'll just start, I guess.
Can you expand it, blow it up a little bit? It's hard to see.
Sorry, Andy, I have a big monitor. You need to get a big monitor.
I do have a 38-inch monitor, but it still wasn't big enough.
We'll make it nice and big, but I just want to make it, can you all see the text and the comment?
Yes, thank you.
Can we take the pictures off the side, or is that at my computer doing that?
That's
your
Okay.
computer.
But you can minimize those, Gene. There should be a bar in between the pictures and what you're seeing from my screen. Just slide that thing all the way to the right, click and slide all the way to the right, and then the pictures are just a small little strip on the side.
Okay, I'll see if I can do that. Thank you.
There is a way to eliminate them all together, but I don't remember how to do
I
it.
just minimized that whole bar.
Well, there you go. Sweet. So we all just
You're all minimized now.
lost weight and I'm short. I love it. Okay. Thanks, Gene. I feel better about myself now. Okay. So this is the part of the general plan land use element that really is important. And it's worth us going through and making sure we agree with the wording and that we wordsmith. If there's a place to wordsmith, it's here, because this sets the tone for the rest of the document and sets the expectations of the town. So this basically is just introductory text. And the reason that a lot of this has come out of here is that it is unnecessary. And back at the very beginning, we understood, thanks a lot to Gene, that the reason that there's so much detail in the general plan is that the land development code or zoning code hadn't been developed, and they wanted to make sure that things got done. So we're going to be doing the land development code pretty much right after this. So a lot of the zoning level stuff really doesn't belong in the general plan. So these types of things here just drop right into the designations. So, okay, so the reason this text was taken out is that it is the sort of thing that changes regularly, and you don't want to do a general plan amendment whenever things change. This all gets shown on a map. We can certainly do a summary of the acreage, and we'll do a lot of the numerical information will be in the EIR. But really, this should be a definition. And what it says here is the land use designation is key in maintaining the rural character of Loomis and is appropriate for agricultural uses. Lists the types of generic uses. It's not meant to be an extensive list. So we don't want to have lots and lots of things in here, just a general overview. The extensive list belongs in your development code, doesn't belong in the general plan. Proposed development and agriculture uses should maintain existing natural vegetation. This is kind of a performance standard. And that's it. We set the density intensity in the table that follows. And we talk about that in the introductory text. The reason,
Mark, the thing about taking out the acreage part is that for somebody that doesn't know, they don't have a clue that over half of our area is basically rural. And so it doesn't mean anything to them. For all they know, you know, we've designated 50 acres and that's it. And the rest of it's all subdivisions like Rockland and everybody around us.
well, one of the
So
really nice things about this, Jane, is we have a map. In fact, we have several maps that all
Okay.
turn into this. And the maps will tell people how much is designated. We can certainly put a summary table in here, but adding the acreages in here means that it will be out of date pretty much day 2.
And honestly, the acreage of that discussion belongs in the setting section.
Right. So that's why we just took it out of the definition. Doesn't mean it's vanishing from the plan, Gene, just that it's not going to be here in each definition.
Okay.
And my concern about including a summary table would be that that's another thing that we're susceptible to forget to update in the future when those numbers change.
Mhm. We could do it as percentages if that would help.
Well,
No,
I
but
can
that changes
change
also.
to-
And it does.
I mean, honestly, this is your designation. It is a description of the land use designation. That's it. So if there's description about, you know, how much of the land is in this ag, that really belongs in the land use setting section to provide the character of the community, rather than in the definition itself or the designation.
Before we go too far on designations, I don't remember if I brought this up last time or we didn't get this far. But my suggestion is that the general plan designations match the ones in the zoning ordinance. Because
Yeah,
it's
remember-
too confusing to have them different.
Well, they're going to be a little different, Gene, because we're going to have several zone districts under the same land use designation.
I remember Jean brought this up at the last meeting. So are we keeping like a tab though of these really important changes that we want to make sure that we incorporate at some point? I feel like she brought up something super important, and is who's writing that down, and are we remembering to do that? I mean, I think that she's absolutely right that we, the land use, the designations should all match.
Well, let's clarify. The land use designation should not nor shall not match the zoning. They're two different things, and we do not want to confuse anybody about their R. And in many cases, in the case of your residential, there is one residential designation that has 3 zoning categories, and we're not going to have those the same. So it is exceedingly important that when we talk about land use designation, they are unique and separate to the land use diagram, the land use plan itself, and the zoning is something else. Now, Jean, you did bring up that you thought the commercial should start with a C for commercial. I think we can have that discussion within the land use designation. But when we implement this land use designation, we have some additional zones that have to be created because we're out of compliance currently between the zoning ordinance and the general plan. We require new zones to bring it into compliance. So I think in one case, we're going to have 4 or 5 zone districts for one land use district. So we really can't have them the same. They're two separate beings, and we just can't have people confusing zoning with the land use designation.
But we can change the commercial probably. That's the most confusing one anyway.
I think that's appropriate. And Mark, put a note to the side just that we will be discussing the land use and zoning designations, and we're adding them as an implementation measure.
Does Tim have his hand up? Is it, or I can't see?
No.
Oh, okay.
There it is.
Okay. So this is the text as it stands now. We can add adjectives. We can do whatever the committee would like. The difficulty that comes from is that we have several residential ag, essentially. We have RA, RE, and rural residential before we get down into other types of residential. So is there something unique and distinctive about the RA other than the land, the parcel size that we want to include here? And do we want to mention anything in here that would help inform people coming to town and wanting to see something?
Well, the difference is going to be in the zoning ordinance, frankly. So, you're going to say, well, we don't want to include that here because there are more things allowed in RA than are allowed in RE, and more allowed in RE than are in the RR.
Okay.
So like I said, you're going to say, well, that belongs in the zoning ordinance. It's not here. So I'm not sure what we should.
Well,
say
in here, if there are differences, probably we need to say text in the RA that this has very agricultural uses and we limit the uses versus an RE. If we could describe what those differences are briefly, then that is important to differentiate the RE from the RA from the RR. Including, Mark, we probably should have some text that the density or the density increases, from the RA. So the RE allows residential, but allows smaller lots than the RA, and the RR, allows smaller lots than the RE. I think that would be appropriate to to get that text in there, and if they're actual. So Gene, what kind of uses, and I don't have the zoning text in front of me. What are
Well, as a
the
matter of fact, I do have the zoning text, not that different. Right, so here's RA and here's RE. And as you scroll through the uses, you see that they match pretty much uniformly. This one here, I mean, we can establish a monastery in the R, so that would be different. Residential care facilities, frankly, the state has usurped our ability to do much there. But the rest of
How
these,
about the minor use permit things though? Are there differences there?
there don't appear to be. When I went through this list, and I went through pretty carefully, Gene.
Is the first column is RA, I'm assuming?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm trying to make this larger.
And how about the animals?
I hadn't even get that far down. That would be an odd thing.
You're in the top animals.
Well, it's in footnotes too.
That's the top. So as I go through land uses, and we have sororities that are use permit here.
Something that you went by has a use permit for something, but not for the other two.
That's the monastery and the sorority.
And how there was something that had permitted for two of these, but not the third one. And you're saying the residential care facility, that's been already usurped by the state for all of these?
I don't know about all of them, but I'd have to take a look. This has all been changed by state law. It frankly was when this was adopted, so I'm not sure how that all got in there. And so we can talk about this, but at the general plan level, I'm not sure there's much difference there.
Well, there was something, because I didn't want my land zoned RE because I was going to lose something. Don't remember offhand what it was.
I'm looking at the land use table, and maybe it's a development standard. So down here we have notes. Now there are development standards down here, and this is the difference.
That's all in the zoning code though, right? That's not in the general plan?
This is all in the zoning. However, if there's something there's no requirement to have these standards in your general plan. You can establish all of these, but we should have some indication of why RA is different than RE, so that we don't constantly get pummeled with requests to change one to the other. But as you read through this, the zoning code does quite a bit of work to make them very similar.
So the real difference is the size of the lots is really what you're saying.
I mean, you're taking out the specific size of the lot, which to me is confusing, and I feel like it should be in there. I mean, that's the big basis of the difference between the two.
Yeah.
And I feel like
It's in there. It's in there. It's Mark, go down to the table, because the size of the lot is shown in the table below. So,
Right.
but you're talking about differentiating in the text. So
The table is where everybody's going to go for the standards. And the problem with your current general plan is there are discrepancies between the table and the text.
Yes. Now, we were supposed to get a table from you guys, right? That showed us all the changes you were going to make, and we were going to be able to see the old table and the new with the changes.
This
Is
here,
that what, that is perfect. So back to the text that you were asking us to say, what is the differentiation between the two? It is definitely the lot size. And so I don't see why we can't just have it in the text and on the table.
that's fine.
No, we don't. No. Anytime you duplicate thing in a general plan, and we've already found that trying to approve projects, and for some reason, the general plan text says 4.6 acres, and somehow the table gets to 4.5 acres, we have a conflict. And so if anything, the text should say this is the largest parcels that we encourage in the town of Loomis. You may want to say go see table X for actuals, but
Okay.
we
I like
do
that.
we don't want to duplicate anything. It's just been a nightmare.
Okay,
So why don't we just put the reference to the table in the text for
And-
each of the land uses?
and say that that is the largest, this is the largest lot size. And I
Yeah.
think Greg has his hand up.
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. And I just had a suggestion in the text when you're describing the different zoning areas, just reference to say, please refer to zoning code or zoning text, zoning ordinance, such and such. And that way people can read the text and they'll right away know that they have to look for more information. Anyway, that's the suggestion.
You can do that. We typically do that in the introduction to all of the designations. We refer people to the table and we encourage them to look at the zoning code for all of the rather than saying it in each and every paragraph where it just gets repetitive. But we can certainly do that in the introductory text.
I mean, that's just a thought. If it's not the greatest idea, then if it's already mentioned elsewhere, as long as it's clear enough, then that should be okay. I'm fine.
You're absolutely spot on, Greg.
Thank you.
And Mark, I do like it in the introduction rather than in each table, but I think we can refer to the table with the actual acreages within each land use designation, just to make it really clear. But I think the zoning reference definitely should be in the introduction. And I apologize to everyone if I feel too adamant, but over all the years and all the issues I've had, these are really important.
That's okay. We just want to make sure that your words that were adamant are put into this description. Which was,
I just took a quick look through the charts that Mark had out, and I don't see anything specific other than the organizational house. I don't notice between the RA and the RE, but there are several things in RR that are not permitted.
Right.
Or need a use permit that the other one, there are some differences between RR and the other two.
Mm-hmm.
So Gene, you referred to them as organizational uses. I mean, we could put something in here that the RA land use designation is unique, that it allows for organizational facilities.
Do we need to say that? I mean, that could change too. You're telling me, if we change the zoning ordinance and that's changed.
Okay, all right, then we could just leave it to the table below that would be better. So that'd be fine. But it's primarily between the RA and the RE is the lot size.
So I don't know who got all the scribbling on there. I can't do anything about it. So.
I'm sorry. I'm on my phone and I was my screen is funky and I accidentally clicked I didn't realize that went on to everybody's. I tell you what.
You've got vast power, Greg.
Yeah. I would tell you what I'll do is I could log off my phone and get onto I had trouble finding the right link and I'll get on my iPad and that'll be better. So I'll disappear for a minute.
It went away.
It's gone.
Oh, it did? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
If you want to go to your iPad, though, we can wait while you do that a little bit. But
Well, you don't need to wait. I'll just go ahead and do it.
okay.
Yep.
Now I'm going to scribble back to whatever. Okay. So
on the RE, Mark helped me here, but you could say, like the rural agricultural land use designation, large lots are permitted and allowed, but but they're reduced in size. There you go. Okay, good. Yeah.
how's that?
Good. Thank you.
Does it matter here? Maybe it doesn't, that these are the smallest lot sizes allowed with a septic system?
Oh.
I don't know if that's the kind of thing you put in or not. Maybe not.
I don't know if that's important for this purpose.
That's a good one, Gene.
Yeah.
Because to be clear, if, I don't know what the policy is, but if you're within a certain distance of a sewer line, regardless of how big your parcel is, you may be required to connect. So I don't want to give somebody this idea that as long as they stay at a certain parcel size, if there's a sewer line out front, I believe they're required to connect.
That's correct.
If they're already existing, Mary Beth, or is it only new created lots?
Both. If somebody currently is served by well and septic, and either of those fail, and they're within X number of feet of that service, they're required to connect.
But not until it fails.
Correct. And in lot splits, it depends on how far away you are that mandate that you have to or not.
Right.
The other thing that, we need to make clear, the two public utility companies for water and sewer under state law are mandated to provide service anytime a lot owner asks for service. So the entire town of Loomis is covered by both water and sewer. But the way they work is if you want water, sewer, or sewer service, you pay to have that extended to you. And then what you were just talking about with Mary Beth is if you have an existing lot and it's a certain distance from either the sewer or water, there are requirements that you connect to those systems. But within the town, anyone in the town can connect to a water or sewer system if they have enough money.
I did, based on our previous conversation at our last meeting, reach out to environmental health to actually get the specific citation of that for utility providers. So I haven't received it yet, but I will.
Any other changes to these two designations?
Everybody on the committee have any comments about those two? Okay.
Well, what is the, I'm trying to get this generally expected to be smaller. Allowed,
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to figure this out. Large parcels are permitted and allowed.
I don't want to feel somebody has to split their property just because it's an RE. You have better wording, Gene? You usually do.
I'm trying to figure out what we're trying to say.
The only thing we're trying to do is differentiate it from the RA. Because as we noted, there aren't a whole lot of substantive differences between the two. So the only difference here is that you can go with a smaller parcel size. Maybe we just, instead of going expected, maybe we just do this.
Yeah, that works.
Okay,
Is that better?
yeah, I think so.
Okay. Any other changes before I scroll?
Permitted and allowed is a bit redundant and repetitive.
Yeah, but it's
I think we could drop one of those.
redundance. Repetitive. How about we just say allowed?
There you go.
Perfect.
Redundant. I like it. Any other changes? Chair?
Can you go up or move it up so we can see? Is that, oh yeah, I think, I guess it is everything. Anybody have any disagreement to this? Okay, and is there anybody publicly?
None.
Okay, let's move on then.
Okay, so now we'll scroll down to RR. I'll leave RE up so that we have some comparative text, because really the only difference there is parcels. So what it says here, the rural residential district allows for agriculture. However, the keeping of large animals is based on parcel size. That's right out of your zoning code. I would rather say, as in basically all land use designations, but particularly in RA and RE, proposed development should maintain existing natural veg and topo to the maximum extent feasible. I know it's a throwaway phrase, Andreas, but for general, that's.
Yeah, because you deleted it out of the first two.
Yep. Yep. They're kind of, just speaking from a practical standpoint, if you're going to farm it, you're not keeping the natural vegetation.
True.
Just from a practical standpoint.
At least on the part that you're farming, but if you're not farming all of it, you.
For the
I
maximum
think the
extent
idea is-
feasible piece comes in.
Yeah,
Just because you're looking to do some farming doesn't mean you level all of what you've got there.
Right. So would it be okay to put it back in? That doesn't give you grief?
Sure.
What does the committee think? Can I just add that back in?
Add back into the first two?
Yes.
I would think that's a yes for me. Anybody else? It was in the original general plan, so.
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
For
Yeah.
instance, you have to get if you're going to take down trees, you have to get a tree permit, and they don't want you to take down everything if you don't have to for the, it has to be for the ag use, not just clear your property.
Right. Although that might be interesting if somebody wants to put in a field and then later on doesn't want the field. Let's not.
10 years, they have to have it for 10 years, otherwise they have to pay for the tree permit.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
I'm looking at what are the uses not allowed in RR. And there are some, let's see. Plant nurseries of various kinds. Storage of petroleum products for on-site use in wineries. Those are not allowed on RR. Multifamily housing of 10 or more. Oh, that's not in any of them. Boarding kennels are not allowed in RR, or animal hospitals or vet clinics, or windmills for electricity generation.
What?
If you got an RR, you can't have a windmill,
No windmills.
which technically are not mills anyway. They're, what are they called? That's not the proper name for them, but that's what everybody calls them.
Right. They're basically generators.
I'm thinking here that basically it provides more limited agricultural uses, which are less intrusive, and something that gives, this is really the first land use designation that begins the transition between agriculture and residential. It allows residential 1 acre lots. So I don't know, just some thoughts on.
I was thinking
maybe-
the same thing, rather than put anything in about the large animals, if it were just allows for something like less intensive agricultural uses.
Yeah.
So. Okay. So right here, what we want to say is.
If you just inserted less intensive agricultural uses.
Yeah. And in a way, Gene, it may not be intensive, but what you were reading is, kind of hazardous materials that you don't want on an acre lot,
Right.
So I don't know if they're less intensive. I mean, if you had some cows and horses on there, they could be intensive, but it's really,
Well, it's more limited, the number you can have.
that's true. Oh, yeah, so I guess less intensive.
I don't know what to do about the petroleum product storage.
I wouldn't worry about it. We wouldn't allow that residential land, any of the residential land.
I think less intensive does work.
The other thing, Andy, you had mentioned something about this could be a transition. This is a transition designation between more intensive ag and residential.
Yeah, it really is, because basically 1 acre lots are going to have a house and then maybe some animals and some ag on it, but not a whole lot. They're not that big. So it really is that transition between the more urban parts of the town and the work for the agricultural parts.
And in reality, what is happening now is, I guess it's not really gentrification of our rural area, but we have, for instance, Montclair subdivision over next to St. Francis Woods. And that's RR. We were expecting a regular sort of an agricultural kind of, some use like that. Well, what's happened is they put as much big house on there as you can get on their RR lot. And they're now going for close to $2 million.
Yeah.
It's something we never anticipated, but I don't know that you can do anything about it when that kind of subdivision goes in.
True.
But I think this captures what we were intending.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that text okay? And should I put it in there somewhere?
I kind of like the text. I'm not sure what the committee, but it when we're looking at the zoning code, when we're looking at any changes in zone or land use designation, to me, that's language that helps kind of look at those to say, does that serve that purpose?
And if I was going to put it in here, I'd probably put it right there.
Okay.
Now, the situation we have, for instance, is we have a zone change application for a change from RA to RR, but it's not consistent with what's going on. It's not really a transitional there. They just plain want to put in.
Right. And so this helps then define, when we're looking at the actual land use designations, this helps us define, is this an appropriate designation?
Okay.
If that's what we want to do, but it just helps to provide an answer to those landowners, is you're part of the transition and we want to keep you there.
How about if we say this land use designation
Yeah.
is intended to serve as a transition?
Okay.
Designation twice.
Go ahead. That would allow us to say, hey, what you want to do is not transitional between
Right.
ag and the developed part of town. You're kind of out by yourself and you just want to do it.
Yep.
I always find it fascinating. I have regular arguments with realtors who want a zoning that is larger. And I keep telling them, this is the minimum zone. Minimum, not maximum, minimum. So if the town has this designated as X and you want larger parcels, we're not going to stop you. You just can't go below that size. And wow, you would think I was just talking Latin or something. They just don't get it. But I want to remind the committee that just because we establish a basement doesn't mean they can't have larger parcels in those areas. So if they want to do a larger subdivision, Gene, they're certainly within their realms. You could build 4 or 5 acre parcels in RR if that's what you wanted to do. There's no requirement, although Andreas, I think SB 330 starts to rear its head, which would be humorous given that it wasn't intended for this kind of development. But anyway, let's not go down there. Is the committee okay with the wording as we've tweaked it?
Can we reread that? I think there might be a little bit of a tweak.
Okay, sure. I'll start from the top. The rural residential land use designation allows for less intensive agricultural uses. This land use designation is intended to serve less than what? Less than the RA and RE
Land use designation.
designations. This land use designation is intended to serve as a transition between more intensive agricultural uses. Well, yeah, I can't have more in there twice. In the developed portions of the town. As in RA and RE land use designation, proposed development agricultural uses should maintain existing natural vegetation topography to the maximum extent feasible.
Is there a problem just putting the developed portions of the town, because that's kind of vague? I mean, what does that mean?
Actually, it's not just developed, it's more intense uses, more urban uses.
I just didn't want to use the word urban in the town in the same
No, I
sentence.
know.
More intensely developed portions of the town.
There you go. Thank you, Andreas.
Got to earn my keep around here somehow.
Oh, you do.
More intensely developed portions of town like that, Andreas? Did I get that right? Okay. Oops, sorry, guys. I thought I actually pulled it up from an email, so.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you. You can tell you're older when you save regularly. My young staff rely on autosave, and I don't trust it. Okay, so can I scroll up, Chair?
Everybody okay with that? I don't
Yeah,
see.
I'm
hands
fine.
raised. Ramona, you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Mhm.
All right, let's move on.
So for low density, this land use designation allows for homes on lots that are smaller than RR and I'll have to fix that. RR and RE, I would believe. And but depending on parcel size, may also allow some agricultural uses, and that's based on the land use table that we have.
Perhaps we should have some notation in there so they can look at the table.
That's
Or,
I don't know. Do we need to try and I'll do whatever the committee would like, but it's in the introductory text.
What are we talking about here? Are these half acre lots, more or less?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, the table, it is 2 to 6 dwelling units per acre, so half acre would be the larger size, correct?
Largest part.
Correct.
Right.
I don't know if this is still true, but we only have 12 acres of it in town. Which makes me wonder whether we need it or not.
I think that's correct. On the map, there's very few of these.
Isn't there a section of that up in the northwest part of town?
so RL is, that's Moretta Lane or Marita Lane. And then it's over there off of King, Los Flores Road. So it looks like we've got only 2 sections of our town that have that zone or that land use designation.
But they probably don't really want to change.
Given that the town has said they don't want
Now-
anything to change, I would just leave it. I would leave it.
Even though now with the last week's law, they get to have 4 houses there anyway. Split the parcel and do 2 each.
Yeah, well, and then your ADUs on top of that, so it's more than, yeah.
Yep.
The
Well,
ADUs are on top of that?
Yes,
Wow.
yeah, so you can have a single family lot, and that single family lot can have its house, the junior ADU and ADU, so that's 3, and then you can split the lot and have 3 more. So that single family lot today could have up to 6 dwelling units.
Now, a question on that is, obviously, that's the maximum, but wouldn't setbacks and things like that kind of really dictate how much you could really do?
4
4
feet,
feet for an ADU, yeah.
4 feet for all of it.
Oh,
4 feet for all of it now? The second house too? Wow.
wow.
The irony is that doesn't impact most cities, but it will impact the town of Loomis.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Andreas is going to earn his keep because he's writing a memo about what this means to us.
So for fear of getting down this rabbit hole here tonight, which isn't really the task at hand, the second home on a split lot would not get the 4-foot setback that ADUs are subject to.
Okay.
So that's a different thing.
Just the
You
ADU.
split a lot and put up a new residence, a new primary residence, that's a different thing than an ADU.
Yeah.
What's
I've-
the difference?
The size, an ADU is really a much smaller thing than a primary residence. So if you split a parcel, you're entitled to put a new primary residence on there if you're in a residential zone, which is what we're talking about here. But an ADU is kind of on top of that as a secondary dwelling unit on a parcel.
Okay.
So we should have a memo out in a couple of weeks, Andreas, to kind of inform all of us what these new laws mean.
Yes.
Really not much to say about residential low density. Again, this is another indication where the size is really the size of the parcel. We can fix this. Maybe this is smaller than.
In all of these residential designations, we've got a bit of inconsistency of how we refer to them. Up
Yeah,
in the larger ones, we've got RA, RE, and down below we refer to them as this land use designation.
Yep, I need to fix all that. What I was attempting to do was keep as much of the current text of the general plan as humanly possible, while still tweaking it. So sometimes the wording gets a little wonky and I need to go back and fix it.
You just may make a note to yourself to make the text consistent in each land use designation.
Yep.
It wasn't carved in stone, so we get to change it now for clarity and conciseness.
Absolutely. Fewer words, the better. Okay. Is there anything you would like to add to residential low density?
Anybody? Looks like we're okay.
I'm anxious to get to the glossary.
Well, keep going, keep going.
Okay, residential medium density. This one here is basically, it's a single family residential land use designation, allows for smaller lot sizes, similar to more developed cities in the region. We can do whatever we want with that. The rest of this information all ended up in the table. So just to be clear, this information ends up on the map, and this information ends up in the table. Once you take those two things out of play, then it would be better to have something in here. Now, this may be a situation where when we put these together, you might want to have a picture or two of how this looks, either from the town or how you would like it to look. Big fan of, so something we can talk about when we get to that point.
So this is where single family residential break is. It's not the one prior. I forget what it was called, low density. Or are we just calling it the wrong thing? Is this actually medium density, or are we trying to say this is single family?
Oh, they're all single family.
Yeah, I think that reference to single family in here is confusing. I think we need to take that out.
Okay.
And for consistency with up above, I think you can take out this residential land use designation and just put RM allows for smaller lot size.
Should we put in here something like that? It's not just a smaller lot size, but it's residential.
That is true.
And I don't care if we have a reference to others in the region. I was just trying to look for something unique about these. For a town the size of Loomis, you have a large number of residential land use designations. This is not something we normally see in a municipality this size.
I would again throw the word intensely in before developed.
I don't think the last half of that sentence belongs in this general plan. I don't think Loomis is similar to other cities in the region.
Okay. So just end it here.
Yeah, end it there.
All right.
The word smaller in there is kind of looking for a comparison that we've now lost. So I think we need to think about what we're trying to describe with medium density here.
I mean, I could put, I could actually reference then.
Smaller lights than the RL.
Yeah, just. How about that?
The reason we're taking out the 2 to 6 dwelling units per acre and putting it into only the zoning code, is that correct?
No, the table that's coming below.
This
Okay.
table, this table stays.
Okay, so people will still have a good and quick, accurate look at what we actually mean here.
Yes.
Correct.
In terms of density. Now, interestingly enough, there's no parcel sizes here. That all goes in the zoning code. But this does establish density, and you could pull out your handy dandy calculator and get there.
It seems like we should have something that people can find that stuff out without going to 3 different places, though.
Well, the choice is get rid of the table and put this directly into the body of the text, or we keep it the way it is. When Mark and I talked, we felt having a table like this is much easier to refer to than looking at every paragraph to figure out where you are. That's the reason we have a table. It's just a lot easier to quickly glance at and see the differences.
This is on Durko. I prefer a table. Just as a matter of convenience.
The table was in the last general plan. So what you're doing is you're just taking out all of the text that's describing what's in the table.
Correct. That is correct. So that we're not duplicating and coming into conflicts as time goes on.
No, I think the table is fine to use that.
The other thing that comes to mind, I mean, we can talk in generalities about the land use designations. We could actually define them right here in this column. This column will go away.
Ah,
This is just for the committee, and then you'd have one table for everything.
I kind of like
Which
that
column?
idea.
Which column is going away?
The source for coverage, this was added at the request of the subcommittee. This table is unnecessary for the general plan.
Yeah, given the text we're writing, I like that a lot better. I don't know about others, but then it's all in one place.
This was simply done at the request of the committee to show what was changing.
But we're going to go through the table when we're there, right?
Yeah.
So we'll talk, can we talk about that when we get there?
Sure.
Yeah.
So leave it there until we have our discussion, and then maybe we're taking it out.
Well, that table, that column would not go in the general plan.
Okay, good.
Go in the general plan.
All right, where are we back to now?
We're right here. So here we have this.
I think unless the committee has a change, let's go on to RMH.
Is there anything more that we should be saying about the medium density? I'm trying to think of. All we're saying is smaller lot sizes.
Right. Yeah, small lot sizes designated for residential land use. So, yeah.
Okay.
Anybody have any discussion?
Why don't you go on to RMH then, Mark?
What is going, well, you'll tell us later when we get in a couple weeks, what is the effect on all this of the new laws? But
The new,
we'll
the
learn
new
later.
laws overlay this. The new laws overlay this. So, yeah, the memo Andreas is preparing will let us know.
Okay.
I think that says it pretty well.
There's just add an S to alternative.
Where is all?
Where do you
where
see
are-
alternative?
Small lot homes and alternatives may be approved at densities ranging from 10 to 20 dwelling units per acre.
Oh, you're looking at high density.
Oh, did I get ahead of you? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
you're ahead of us. You're one designation ahead.
Everybody okay with RMH?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
So this is the last of the residential land use designations. Oops. That was the Freudian slip, wasn't it?
You put the densities in there, that should come out because it's in the table.
Right.
Absolutely right.
Maybe it seems a little run on to at the and alternatives, maybe a semicolon and take the and out. We're keeping that.
Let's do there. Let's see.
Small homes, semicolon, alternatives may be approved. Or what do we even want to say about
I would just
alternatives?
leave it, Jane. Honestly, I would just die there.
Okay,
The reason I say that is I don't want somebody to come in and say, well, I want to do this. And the town's like, no, we don't want that. This one's.
well, if we're taking out the numbers, then it doesn't quite make it much sense to even leave it in the alternatives.
Just leave it the way it is. With it stopping after a small lot homes. In which case I need to put.
Okay.
Anybody have any changes there?
And this will cover what was the overlay will be covered by that as well as anything else that we eventually have to designate, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah, remember, we'll have to fiddle with the dwellings when we get down to the table.
Correct.
Does RH look okay to the committee?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, going on to commercial. Do the same here. And now what I did here was I wanted to refer to the previous residential land use designations. And so that should really be RMH. So based on the text. This is Andreas is talking about. I don't want to create new residential land use designations in the non-residential land use area.
No.
That makes any sense. So if we're gonna allow residential, then I think we should refer to one of the previous land use designations that we've defined within here. And if we have restrictions, like this one restricts it as part of a mixed use structure, that's fine. But the density, intensity, and all the other stuff that goes along with that would then link to an adopted and defined land use designation.
Now, is this one that we could change the name to CO or something?
Change it wherever you like.
So that we get all the commercials starting with being commercial anyway.
Um,
Don't know. See, generally, office and professional is not considered commercial the way we would think of it. So, yeah,
Okay.
if you put the word commercial in there, but I take.
You're going to give the impression that a whole lot more is allowed that's
Right.
typically allowed in a commercial
You're
land
right.
use designation.
It's right. Well, right in the zoning code, it's called office commercial. That's why I would CO.
It shouldn't be.
That might be something we'll need to rename once we get to the zoning code update.
Right.
maybe we make that an implementation thing.
Yeah.
They were trying to put all the R's and all the commercial together. That's why RA became, RA used to be AR, agricultural residential, with the emphasis on agriculture, and that got changed just for the sake of conformity with the other residential.
Now, as a broader policy consideration, is residential something we want to allow in the office and professional land use designation?
Already allowed.
Currently is, right. So I guess the question is allowed or removed.
Allowed or what?
Or the question
fine.
is, do you allow medium density within your office and professional land use designation is the question.
I'm fine with keeping it because it says part of mixed use structures.
Okay.
So I'm fine keeping it. myself.
So when we say mixed use structures, that means the structures a structure has to have both office and residential in it, correct? If you have residential.
Yes, that's what we mean, I think.
Okay, well, there's some other text in here, so we'll bring this up again. Is, does it have to be in the same building? Can they be in separate buildings but on the same parcel? I think that's some of the, if we could get the committee's thoughts on what is anticipated when you have residential uses with your office and professional. And I read this right now as it has to be in the same structure.
That's right.
Yeah,
You're reading it correctly.
that's the way I read it, but I personally don't have an issue with allowing the residential to be either horizontal or vertical mixed use. I don't have a problem with that. So I mean that
So if that's what the committee would like to allow, we'd need to change it to mixed use development, I think.
So what I think we need to
No, I
do
don't
is,
think you do want mixed use development. That means they can be separate structures and you can have a little office in the front and some big old apartment building on the rest of the parcel. I don't think we want mixed use development. I think we want structures. I don't know.
I'm just saying that because somebody else just said that they were okay with that type of mixed use.
No, that's not what she said. She said that she didn't mind if the structure had it on the ground, residential on the ground. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ramona. I thought you meant you didn't care if it was above or or behind it, but not a separate building. What did you mean?
Yeah, I kind of meant that just because, I really question from a feasibility standpoint of financing and building if, my overall preference is for vertical mixed use, but I just don't know how, if you're handcuffing some good projects or potential good projects, because it sounds to me that financing for things that are vertical mixed use are a lot harder than financing things that could be that would be more considered horizontal mixed use, that they could be in the same development, but not be, the resident doesn't have to be part of the office building. So that's my biggest concern with that. But so it's just a matter of opening it up more instead of making it more restrictive. That's just my thoughts on it. But you're right. I didn't think about it unless there's some percentage that you could do that if it's office professional, so much percentage has to be office professional and a smaller percentage could be residential, instead of like your example of a small office with the rest of it being apartments and the token office is there. I get that potential problem that could be there.
so as a committee, we need to define what is a mixed use structure. And Jean, you're assuming that it's more of the residential on top and below is the office? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I don't know that I would want to limit it to that in case there were some kind of, they could have it in back of the office, for instance.
Right. So in the planning world, gentlemen in the planning world, correct me if I'm wrong, but mixed use structure means something different than something else. Is that right? Versus vertical versus horizontal. Is that right?
No, I think
Typically, so if the town would like to define the vertical and horizontal within the structure, I think that just helps clarify for the town staff and future applicants what can be done. Because typically, Mark, tell me I'm wrong, but typically when you think of a structure, it is commercial on the first floor, offices on the second floor, and residential on the third floor. Your typical mixed use structure.
Yeah, that's right. And I can tell you that it will be rare because it's really expensive to build, and because you have the different occupancies at the different levels, the land values in town probably aren't going to support that.
When we get to the glossary, I have added some text for mixed use structure where we talk about a vertical separation versus a horizontal separation in a mixed use structure. Now, I think that's different from having just mixed use development where they are separate buildings.
Okay, so so maybe we agree mixed use development is separate buildings, mixed use structure, and then if you define it in the glossary, then that takes care of that issue of the kind of building it can be.
It does, but we still need some clarity from the committee on what type of mixed use they actually want to allow in these various designations.
Thoughts on this committee? This is an important one.
Are you asking, do we want mixed use structure or mixed use development? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, we really need to define what this means by mixed use structure.
So I think what I heard the committee say is they don't want mixed use development within the office professional. So now we're talking mixed use structure. And if we define structure as either being vertical or horizontal, that's okay. But if for some reason the committee feels everything should be a vertical, then that should be said here.
And can you describe vertical and horizontal for the committee, please?
Okay, vertical would be at least a two-story building with offices on the bottom and residential on top. A horizontal could be a two-story building with where it drops down and becomes a one-story building where it would have offices on the first floor and possibly residential units on the first floor also. They may be towards the side of the building, whatever, but you could have residential uses on the first floor.
Would it be beneficial to read the existing glossary definition for mixed-use structure?
We're going to be redefining it in the new glossary, Mary Beth. So I think it's important for the committee to say, what do they intend on happening? And we can make sure the words are correct.
There was no existing for mixed-use structure. That's been added.
Yeah.
This is Sean. Can I add my 2 cents? I don't know how you would do a horizontal mixed-use structure. Like if you've got office in the front of a building, how would you get to the residential in the back? Right?
No,
I don't know.
If there's a parking lot in the back and you have a single-story structure with handicapped access off that back unit, I mean, depending on the lot size. Yeah.
If you have a hallway entrance where you would access residential units through another door and office, for example.
So why do we need to say vertical or horizontal instead of just saying mixed use? If it's either or potentially both, why do we need to say what it is? The other thing I'm a little bit concerned about is if we're talking about mixed use, we don't want to allow commercial and office and professional district. And so when I think of mixed use, I think of commercial on the bottom, residential on the top.
In this case, it would be just office and residential.
Right. Right.
And
So the zoning code has to reflect that just because it's, mixed use doesn't mean that you automatically get commercial because, you know what I'm saying? Somehow that needs to be called out.
It's already in your zoning code. And really the primary issue that communities grapple with is, do you want residential on the ground floor? Everything else is semantics. Do you want residential on the ground floor? If the answer is no, then it becomes a vertical mixed use and we define it that way. If the answer is we don't care in this particular land use designation, then we can go with what Sean said. It just doesn't really matter. Just call it mixed use and more. So the question for the committee really is, in the office and professional, do you want residential on the bottom floor? Street entrance.
I don't know why we would care about that.
Yeah.
I don't know why would that be an issue?
Some towns just don't want residential in their commercial or their office places on the ground floor. I can't explain it to you, Sean. There's really no planning reason why you wouldn't want that. I guess somebody's curtains might offend sensibilities.
I would think that it would probably be better not to have residential on the bottom, because I think it's awkward if you have clients, coming into your business and then people, are coming back from vacation and party mode or whatever, go into their residence. I think it's a little bit more discreet if you have the residences on an upper floor and maintain businesses on the lower floor, separate them.
That's generally.
We're hearing this from some potential applicants right now. The problem is if you build a handicap residential unit, if you have it on the second floor, you have to have an elevator, and there's a huge cost there. So some of the question is, to have something that is for maybe not just handicap, but elderly, whatever, that you have access, ground floor access. So that's, and I'm going back, why are we asking this question? Because the way this is existing written, our interpretation is it is only multi-story buildings allowed if you're going to mix these uses. And we've heard the discussion of how about we allow both? And that's why this is a policy decision for the committee.
Well, I'm thinking kind of also of live work units, which are currently allowed. And I had, it used to be that they were more typically living on the second floor, but I had friends who, their family had a furniture business and they had their family home, apartment, I guess you would call it, although it was not, they were owned, the same people, they lived in the store that, behind the store. So a live work kind of situation, they're not, they're going to know what interferes with the business or interferes with the family. I guess we're looking at this as necessarily as something that is rented out to somebody else, I guess.
But the basic is, do we allow residential uses on the first floor or not? That's really the question here. And I really like the idea of encouraging live work spaces. I think that can be done in other ways. But the real question here is, can you put a residential unit on the ground floor in this mixed use structure?
Okay, my comment is, if you allowed the residential on the first floor because it's too expensive to put an elevator, then you're restricting disabled people from living on the second floor. And I don't know if you can do that. So in either way, no matter what you do, you're going to have to put that elevator in. And as long as the elevator is in, you might as well just restrict the first floor to the business only. Does that make sense?
I haven't heard of ADA requiring that. I haven't heard that as long as you provide for, mobily, people that have mobile deficiencies, I believe you're okay. I've never seen that ADA requires that you have a second floor unit that is accessible. Because I know you can have 3-story buildings, an apartment building, without an elevator. But the moment you're talking ADA compliance, the only way they're going to get up there is an elevator.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is that if ADA comes in, then you're saying, well, we have ADA compliant units on the lower floor. Therefore, anybody who has those needs must live on the lower floor, because we're not going to provide it for the second floor.
And that will be their choice, yes.
Okay, well, if that's legal, then that kind of negates my argument. I mean, I still feel that they should restrict the lower floor to the business only, but maybe that other aspect. So it's up to the committee. That's just my input.
Can I hear Christie's new definition of mixed use structures, since it was never defined and is currently listed in the zoning code as it was previously written in this land use designation?
Sure, here is the definition. A structure or building housing more than one type of use, such as commercial and residential uses. The uses may be vertically separated, with one use on the bottom floor and another use on secondary floors, horizontally separated with one use at the front of the structure and other uses at the rear of the structure, or a combination of both vertical and horizontal separation. And that might be a little restrictive if say units were put to the side if we can revise that.
So actually, that kind of answers the question. If everybody agrees with that definition of a mixed-use structure, then we don't have to say vertical mark, unless people are unless the committee's adamant that that it is on the second floor.
I like the idea personally of having residential on the top floor or on the back of a structure, and then the commercial property on the front, the street facing or on the bottom level, personally. But I don't think it should just be limited to a vertical mixed use structure for this.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Can we hear from somebody? Who have we not heard from? How about Tim? You have an opinion, Tim? And if not Tim, Randy actually left. And Ramona, you've pretty much, what do you think of the verbiage of the mixed use structure, Ramona?
I think I like the definition of it. The only one question I had with it was commercial. And if we don't really consider office professionals commercial, then that would be my only question about it.
That was just put in as an example of one of the two uses.
Okay. Yeah. So otherwise, I think taking, just leave it as mixed use structure. And if you define mixed use structure as what you were defining it as, I think that's fine.
Jean, what do you think?
I like that definition. That's fine with me.
So sounds like I like the definition too. So I think that definition is good. And then let's just go back to then it, as it is written, office and professional as part of a mixed use structure would be okay to keep it just plain like that. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Mark, could you take out the slash between OP and just make it OP? For some reason, that slash bothers me. Unless everybody likes to slash it.
No, take out the slash. And we didn't change the medium density, did it? Medium high density, we're going to change that.
Oh, yeah.
RMH is what we're using, right? RMH.
Is that what it is now?
And then is everybody okay with the text now with office and professional?
Just remind me, what is the density on RMH?
On RMH?
2 to 10.
Okay.
It's actually in the deleted text.
I think it's 6 to 10.
Is it 6 to 10?
Mhm.
Oh,
Oh, then it was
there
wrong.
it says 2 to
You mean the general plan text was wrong?
Yeah, it's 6 to 10.
RM is 2 to
Oh.
6 and RMH 6 to 10.
Just my only other comment or question is this text fairly bulletproof in the terms that office and professional is defined in such a way that it will restrict it to relatively quiet uses? Because you really don't want to have, is somebody going to come in and they're going to be professional weightlifters and they're going to be banging weights on the floors, I just want to be sure that somebody doesn't sneak in and say, well, I'm a professional drummer.
That's true.
It's my office, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it is a business. I don't know, as I read it.
I mean,
I
I understand the intent.
Examples are pretty clear.
Okay, I mean, it's somewhere else in our plans and codes that it would restrict, should be something about noise. If not in this statement, then, somewhere else that, does not exceed certain noise levels. Because I mean,
In the zoning, we can specifically exclude weightlifters.
Yeah, and drummers.
And a weightlifting drummer would not be good, but
Yeah. Anyway, just something to think about.
All right. Is everybody okay with this text? And then before we go on, I think we should probably take about a 5-minute break, if that's okay with everybody, just to kind of stretch. We're halfway through.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Does that sound okay?
I'll
5
second that.
minutes? Okay.
Okay. Thank
All
you.
right, we'll see you in 5 minutes.
That's great.
Or whatever.
7:40 is our return time.
Oh, they really cleared out of the depot, didn't they? There's nobody on camera. It's too funny.
Mark, that
Someone's
was
there.
what my wife made for me.
Yeah, I missed out on enchiladas this morning or this afternoon.
Yeah, these are cupcakes.
See, cupcakes are awesome because they aren't the calories of a full cake. They're like little cake shooters, and you can almost justify eating a couple of them.
You can't really justify it, but it still tastes good.
Well, you do anyway. I actually prefer pie. I'm a pie guy. Pie and cobbler. Oh. Beautiful.
The granddaughters are coming tomorrow, so she's getting ready.
Oh, I love it. So when my kids come to visit, they want me to make cinnamon rolls.
Oh, that sounds good.
So if we have in-person meetings, are you bringing us some?
I'll bring you, I promise, Gene, I will bring a tart to do in-person meetings. This is my, that's my fruit tart.
Oh,
Looks good.
It sits on top of the white chocolate ganache. Yeah, it's not for diets.
So are you bringing something like that and sharing it with us all? Because otherwise it's just mean to show that to us.
It is kind of mean, isn't it? I will bring one to a committee meeting and we can all share some.
Sweet.
You know, it's funny because I'll bake something like that that takes a while. And people go nuts over cheesecake. Cheesecake, I could teach teenage boys to make cheesecake. It is so simple to make a New York style cheesecake, but that's what people like. So.
We are approaching 7:40 and just waiting for Chairman Jan to come back from her little break.
Okay, are we ready to finish up?
Yeah.
Everybody, everybody back?
yes.
And
I just had a point of information comment on the office. And we do allow a few retail, commercial kind of businesses. Actually, we have over a page of description of different kinds of offices. And we do allow office supporting retail, and it describes it in the examples are books, computer equipment, newspapers, office supplies. In other words, things that would be used by that kind of office. We're, I think, assuming an office complex more than anything else. And the other kind that is allowed is only apparently within a business such as it lists a hospital. You might have a gift shop or flowers or something like that. So we do allow, but limited. Restaurants and coffee shops are allowed.
Yeah, I just think there should be something in there that the planning commission or somebody has some discretion, because somebody can easily sneak in. You can have aromatherapy is something I just thought of. Some can come in and they can have a lot of, a lot of odors, and some people have allergies to those odors. So, if you specifically list things, I mean, that's great. It gives people an idea, but there should be some, and this is Andre would have to figure out some way to legally write in a little clause that gives us a loophole where we can exclude somebody.
I'm going to come back to the policy question again. Do you want to allow the sort of broad range of commercial uses Gene just described in here going forward?
Yes.
Okay. And so from there, I think we're back to the noise and compatibility issues that.
Yeah, just some kind of a
noted.
Just so we have some mechanism to exclude some strange exception that would come in that really does not fit the intent, but might fit the language.
No noisy professionals.
Or smelly, Greg says.
Those smelly, noisy professionals that lift weights and drum.
Just think when we used to have typewriters, how noisy it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, do we want to make any changes here based on Jean's note, or are we good?
I wasn't suggesting changes. I was just,
Reiterating. Yeah, no, I'm fine with what Jean read.
So let's go on to general commercial if it pleases the chair.
Please.
And
So should we change that to commercial general, just begin the naming sequence to start with commercial?
can we call it general commercial and still make it GC?
With that, we could.
I mean,
Where
CG.
just
I mean, can we call it CG and still make it general commercial?
we can do whatever we want. This is our playground. I mean, the point of an abbreviation is to remind you what it says. And this makes the Virgo in me OCD nuts. But
it's the way we've been referring to it for 20 years.
So it works. It must be fine. I have seen some communities go, commercial, comma, general, but I always thought that was,
it may fit your PD.
So you want to call it GC for general commercial? That would be consistent with the next one down, town commercial, TC.
No, I think we need to get it more like what everybody's been calling them for years, because nobody really refers to everybody refers to what is in the zoning code, which are all commercial of one kind or another. So we have general commercial. We don't use town center commercial. That one is typically called central commercial. I mean, I'm not saying we have to stick with the same, if we want to change things, but it would help to have it consistent as much as we can between the zoning ordinance and the general plan. The question I have is this intended for the commercial outside of the downtown core, except we have some that is, well, it depends. How did downtown core, it was defined as only on Taylor, but I thought we were also looking at including Horseshoe Bar. So what is the downtown core now?
That committee hasn't made that decision yet.
That's going to be later this week.
So that decision is going to affect this definition.
So Mark, make a note that we're going to wait for the recommendation of the Business Corridor Committee.
Tim has his hand up.
Go ahead, Tim.
Hi there. Thank you. All right. So without stifling too much of our progress, I want to go back to residential for a moment and bring up an issue that I have that's been on my radar for quite a while. And I want to get the pulse of other committee members on whether you share this or not. But so if you look at the project that's happening next to Lorenzo's right now, what you have is, and I don't know if anybody's noticed this, but what you have is are duplexes there, and they all look the same. And it's really, in my humble opinion, a missed opportunity. That area could have been a really cool project, right? Where they're all single families, boutique style housing. And I know the developer would have preferred to put single families there, but the current zoning didn't allow it. And nobody would be crazy enough to try to ask for a zoning amendment there. So where, and this is a question for staff, where in what we're doing right now would this be appropriate to address? And technically, how would we address it if the will of the committee was to make a recommendation to change that? And I'm not sure if I'm being clear, but and if anybody else has an opinion on that, if they like the way those duplexes are looking and every duplex looks the same and that's fine with them, I respect everybody's opinion, but I think that we can do better there. And certainly if the opportunity comes up in another area of town, we ought to be a little more flexible with what is allowable. I'm sorry. And when I say duplex, I actually mean, I don't think they're duplexes. I think they're half plexes because they're adjoined. All right. But they're two parcels adjoined by a wall, and it just looks, I'll be blunt, it looks terrible. And we can do better than that. We ought to do better than that. We ought to raise our standards. So back to staff, that's what I have for staff. Where would we address this if the will of the committee is to do that? And then I'd like to hear from the other committee members on whether that is something that is of the will of the committee. Thank you. And I'll pause.
Real briefly, it's really two pieces. One, design standards would deal with what the buildings look like. So that would be an implementation measure of the general plan. And then two is, I'm not sure what land use designation those buildings live within, but it's to look at the land use designation and then define what can occur in that designation.
It's actually, the land use designation is actually GC.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's general.
So
commercial.
talking about it now is a good place to do it. But if you're going to be putting residential and you wanted them to be single family lots, they would have had to done a general plan amendment. I thought that they were zoned resident, or the land use designation was some sort of residential, but it's not. It's general commercial.
So then what should have been there was the mixed use structures.
Well, that's the way it was approved. I wasn't here when it was approved, so I got here right after it was approved. But my understanding is it was approved as a mixed use project. That's why you've got the commercial up in the front and then the residential around the back, not as a mixed use structure. And
it says or site development, so that's what your general plan allows. So
Yeah, it was site development. The mixed use structure, they could put mixed use on top of the commercial when and if they ever get that built. So it probably was a site development. Are these 0 lot lines then? I don't remember that project exactly. I mainly remember that it had the carriage units that for ADUs on those.
Gene, when it came through, it definitely came through as a mixed use project.
Yeah.
Not mixed, because mixed use project is allowed in the GC, whereas in the commercial tourist, it has to be in a structure. So when that came through, and the one exception that you guys at the commission made was that he could develop the commercial second, as opposed to the general practice of having the commercial built first and then the residential back behind it. But it did definitely came through as a mixed use project, not a mixed use structure.
Yeah, mixed use being on the front. So the street frontage, if I recall, the street frontage will be retail on the bottom and residential on the top. But what you're seeing right now is the residential section going in first. And so,
and most typically, Tim, you would not have seen that first. Most typically, the typical process would have been that the commercial gets developed first and then the residential comes behind it. You don't necessarily see that development coming, just the purely residential coming in. It was very highly touted. The commission really liked the way it was going, the housing it provided and that kind of stuff. But there was definitely an exception made for allowing the residential development to come in prior to the commercial development. And they don't have a set, I mean, when the commercial comes, it can be a choice of either solid commercial or, you know, a mixed use structure of residential at that time. But the focus was that the front two parcels are going to be commercial. The residential structure was, the residential portion was the back portion of the project.
Right.
Well, I think that to Tim's point, I think one of the possible failures on that in hindsight might have, I don't really recall a lot of discussion about design review. And I think maybe that would have fixed some of the concerns that Tim is raising. But the other aspects, I think everybody was fine with the mixed use and the carriage units and that and the other.
And Tim, actually, single family lots would have been allowed here as long as you met the medium density standards. It doesn't say it has to be a duplex. It doesn't have to be a 0 lot line house. It's just you have to meet the medium density. So that was, you know, in the design of the subdivision, a choice that was made to do 0 lot line houses.
So the developer, and it's been a while since I've looked at this. So what I'm hearing is the developer might have chosen to do half-plex residential there instead of single family.
Yeah, he actually chose, and he definitely made it half-plex versus duplex, where it's all individual parcels. The duplexes are not a duplex parcel; they are individual parcels.
Well, what I'm raising is that you know, looking back in retrospect, that should have been a single. Should be single families instead of half plexes. I mean, there's no reason to have adjoining walls unless there's some zoning restriction that
there isn't.
Okay.
Reading this, they could have done single family lots, small lots with a small house could have been there, but it was obviously the developer's choice to do 0 lot line.
Hi, this is Bonnie. You know, in terms of the increased intensity use, though, of having, you know, more density, I think that that's appropriate given the location. I think, again, to Greg's point, we really do need to nail down the design standards and guidelines. I think that's kind of where we've got a weak spot. And that, you know, if we're proactive about it, then we can end up with projects that have a visual that and an aesthetic that we like. Whereas, you know, you don't want to do it project by project because, you know, I think it gets messy that way.
And to Bonnie's point, the state is ratcheting down on that. You won't be able to do it project by project. You'll have to have objective standards that apply uniformly in order to make them stick.
You should probably change medium density to, isn't it RMH, to be consistent with our other designations, Mark?
Yes.
So are we increasing the density there?
No, just a minute, maybe it's not.
I mean, I was wondering on the other one that we changed, are we changing the density?
I'm not changing. I haven't recommended any density changes.
So RMH is a medium density, but that's medium density high. So should it just be RM, Mark?
See, that's what I wondered on the other one that we changed.
Yeah,
Let's go down to the table and look for what has 2 to 10.
It's RM. Yeah.
So RM goes to 6 and the other one goes to 10.
So yeah, we moved.
So it looks like the office professional and the general commercial actually had a different range than any of our existing residential designations.
Okay.
Which we shouldn't be doing.
I agree with that. And that's why I suggested.
What did it have?
2 to
It
10.
had 2 to 10.
Yeah.
So it kind of spanned RM and RMH.
So it would be, but the thing is, you're not going to limit them to just 6 units per acre. They want to go in 3, are you? Is that a minimum? You can't have any less than 6 units per acre?
No. Well, wait.
I would read that before.
That's what I'd read also is minimum 6, maximum 10.
Maybe that's why it had its own designation before, because we wanted it broader.
Could be.
And I'm sorry, I'm coming in a little bit late because I had another meeting, but is this what's reflected in the housing element? Because we did increase density to meet the RENA numbers. And I thought that the commercial general.
That was the high density. We changed that, and the town center. So those were the 2 locations we changed.
Okay, thanks.
So in reality, the general commercial allows RM or RMH based on the range that I see under the general commercial. So I would go up there and put, in that case, both. It allows RM, RMH land use designation.
I don't like that because those two have different lot coverage requirements, so we're going to get into confusion on that.
Dang. Okay.
So we need to settle on one of those ranges that we like for this.
I would vote for just RM, and the reason being just because we know that there's going to be increasing pressure to increase the density, and so why start up high? I'd rather start low.
No, but we also have a different density in there. So honestly, the general commercial has its own range of density and coverage. Those are, you know, they're totally separate than the RM or. Okay, Andreas, how do we, you know, because we use medium density in other places, but
Which was
I'm
the
almost
one-
thinking of creating a new residential land use designation that's going to be used for this office professional and general commercial, something like a medium density mixed use residential
breaking
designation.
You see how many residential designations this town already has?
I know, but if these numbers are what they want here,
What if I offer this? What if instead of referring to RMH,
Yeah, take it out.
refer
Take
to-
out density at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
why don't we just refer to this table? And then we can go down there and fiddle with it.
okay.
Just take it out.
I think it's almost insane to add more residential land use designations to this town when we're only talking a difference of 4 units.
So instead of saying RMH, you have to say residential land uses may be allowed as described in table da 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 da.
so then we're back to basically creating a new residential land use designation within the office professional.
And also within the general commercial. Correct.
Yes.
And the problem there, Andreas, is they have higher coverages because of those kinds of uses.
Yeah.
So I don't. I think that's just what it's going to have to be.
Why don't we take a break then and go down to this table, give up on the definitions. Let's talk through, let's just talk through these densities, because obviously we're high centered on these acreages. And I can't tell you, I work in massive cities and we don't have this many residential land use designations. So I love the fact that we're trying to get down to this level, but this becomes an implementation nightmare for the town when somebody wants to change from one to the other to get one or two things changed when there's really no reason. I mean, if there's a reason for them, by all means, let's leave it in. But my goodness,
what do you mean when they want to change from one to another? We don't have people doing that here.
Well, we have requests to go from RE to RR or R to RI. So we do have people wanting to get more units right now. And they go up.
But we don't
So
have,
another-
do we have any for downtown for any of those things? I have, if there are, I haven't seen them.
Okay.
So another approach would be to collapse the RM and the RMH, because that gets us the 2 to 10 range. And then to get more granular in the zoning designations.
But that means then we're changing what actually happens out on the properties.
Andreas, I have a question for you. Back up to the commercial and other designations. What if we just take out medium density and just have it say residential uses may be allowed? See the chart, and you said that was create another problem.
It's essentially creating another residential land use class designation within a non-residential land use designation.
But is that really a problem? I mean,
Mark had identified that as an issue earlier on when we were talking.
So,
well, is it, but it's an issue to Mark, but is it really a problem for us?
Not even that much of an issue for me. It's just confusing.
All right.
If you want to leave it the way it is, that's fine. You know, there's no law that says you have to do this, but it is confusing to people.
but the thing is, they're going to be, if you say within these office, professional, general, commercial, residential land uses as described in table X,
Yeah.
are part of mixed use. Then you go down and look at the table and you just have a different range of uses. The big thing there is the coverage, because you're getting greater coverage in both of those, just because of the commercial background and the office background. So,
And I was just trying to be simple and refer to residential that we had.
Where's the one that was 2 to 6? Has that been changed to 2 to 10 or what? Where was that?
The one that would change to RMH?
okay, the general commercial allows 2 for 10. And there are 2 residential districts, one 2 to 6 and one 6 to 10. So those still remain the same. So the existing land use densities for these land use designations have not changed.
There's a big difference between 6 units and 10.
And that's what you allow within the general commercial right now. So the reason maybe for the 2 is if you have a couple of live work units or employee units, say for a restaurant, that because right now you can have no less than 2 units per acre and no more than 10 units per acre, the way it's written.
We can just call it RM or RMH if we really have a problem with the way it's worded. Before, in our zone.
Oh, you're breaking up, Beth. Can you repeat that?
Can
you
multifamily units are allowed. So we could just say RM or RMH.
Yeah, but what Andreas has brought up, our coverages are different. So when we do that, then you have a conflict between the general commercial coverage and the RMH coverage. So my own thought is pretty much leave it the way we have it in the table. And just in the text, don't use RMH or RM and just say residential uses are allowed as defined in the table.
Yes, that makes sense to me.
And I'm fine with that if Mark's fine with that.
Yep, totally fine with that.
Does anybody disagree with that? Okay, so we'll take out medium density and just leave it as residential.
Yep, and you'll have to do the same up above too. Yeah.
Yes, at an office professional.
Thank you. Yeah.
So we now have 7 residential land use districts. Do we need to change? We need to change the name here, or are we? I did not remember where we landed. Do we want to leave it as GC or CG, or what's the decision of the committee?
CG. CG is consistent. GC is not.
Consistent with what?
What
With
Gene
the-
had asked for.
With the terms that's in our zoning code, with what everybody refers to
Okay.
land use.
So how does I apologize, I don't have the zoning code up. What is the
Beth, you froze.
finding things in our zoning code is interesting.
Yeah. One thing, again, my recommendation is do not use the same terminology between the land use designation and the zoning designation, because there could be horrible confusion. Are you following the zoning? Are you following the land use when you're having a discussion? So we just need to make sure that the zoning has a different terminology than the land use.
Yeah,
That doesn't make sense. It's
It makes
very
absolute sense, because the land use designation is, again, at the general plan level, and the zoning gets into a great amount of detail, and it is possible to have more than one zone category, one zone district for a land use designation. Now, unless Andreas, if you don't see a problem with that, but I've just, you know,
I think it lends itself to confusion if we've got something that's called CG at the land use level, and then we have multiple things under that at the zoning level, one of which is CG.
right.
There's only one designation in the zoning, and it's called general commercial CG.
I,
And that's where in land use, it should be GC, just the opposite of the zoning of
yeah,
C.
you're right. Yeah, it really should, just to be, we just don't want, and you know, as a committee, you are mixing up zoning and land use all the time. And as planners are sitting here, are we talking zoning or land use? And we're trying to make the difference. But there is a difference. There truly is a difference. And when it comes to litigation, whatever, we want to clearly define the difference between a land use designation and a zoning designation. It's just really important to do that.
So if we're looking at our Town of Loomis map and the legend says general commercial GC, it seems like we've been using that for a long time.
Yes, you have 20 years.
So does anybody want to change it? What do you guys, I mean, it seems, I think you brought this up, Jean. What is it? What would you like to see here?
Well, I don't actually get the point that we have to call them different things when it's so confusing to people. And even the consultants early on were confusing TD and you know, the tourist commercial and town center commercial. Why should we inflict that kind of confusion on anybody else that is reading this, trying to figure out what's going on in town? We should make it consistent and simple for them.
The problem
I
is the land use is not the same as zoning. They're absolutely different. They're not. They have different legal ramifications. And so if somebody's saying CG, we know they're talking zoning. If they say GC, we know they're talking land use.
Tim Onderko.
Thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and go with staff's recommendation on this one. I think there's some wisdom there and things that we may not be seeing from our standpoint. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
If you're just talking about acronyms, the zoning code says RA and RE and RR. So those aren't different, just as a matter of fact.
I think the operative term there is yet.
Is what?
Yeah, the zoning code is scheduled to be changed after this, and I think that's where that discussion will go. But it's up to the town. I'm just noticing that it's 8:10, and we're just on this issue. Do we want to come back to it, let the committee think about it, and get on with our discussion here to make better use?
I think we'll finish it up. We're gonna decide.
Okay.
All right, let's, so what staff is recommending is keeping it at GC, is that correct?
Correct.
And then once the zoning code is updated, then there'll be a better differentiation there in the zoning code?
So my recommendation is your zoning code acronyms are not the same as your general plan acronyms, so that when we're all talking, we can talk and know if we're talking land use designation or zoning designation. It is a real issue in the town of Loomis right now that those two are combined as one discussion, and they're absolutely not the same thing. And
So
especially where you have more than one zoning designation in a general plan land use designation.
Okay, so maybe if we could put in a comment,
Yeah.
staff recommendation here.
Recommendation is to have the acronyms different between the land use designation and the zoning map designations.
Can you give us some idea of what the legal problems are? Because it's not clear to me why making things confusing is legally a problem. I mean, why simplifying things and making it clear, why is that a problem?
Because the land use says, when we're talking the land use diagram and land use issues under the general plan, they have a different set of parameters, say under SB 330, where a project has to comply with the general plan, that are different from the zone. And we need to be clear that, say in the case of SB 330, where you have to be in compliance with the general plan land use designation, that you are in compliance with that, and you're not thinking that you're in compliance with the zone designation.
But doesn't the zoning have to be in compliance with the general plan?
It can be more restrictive, Gene.
Yeah, generally the zoning is more restrictive than the general plan.
I mean, one of the things that we've done pretty much since the beginning on this is we refer to land use as designations. We refer to zoning as districts. Most people don't do that. And they don't do that because they don't work in it on a daily basis like we do. But that's our primary distinction. And it's really to keep track of the two because they are different. But you know, it's the will of the committee.
I mean, I'm thinking then why don't we call everything GP and then our acronyms, GP, acronym, and then when we get to the zoning, you say zoning acronym. I mean,
It'll be
would it be just prudent just to take this, just take a roll call on this item and then move on?
Yeah, do that, and then we'll do what you tell us to do.
all right.
So I'll make a motion.
How about we start with you, Tim?
Madam Chair, I'm just going to make a motion to approve the recommendation of staff. Thank you.
Which is what? To make it GC, or are we talking something broader than that?
Recommendation is that the land use designations have a different acronym than the zoning districts acronyms. That's
Thank you. That's the motion.
So
What is
that
the-
affects all those residential ones that we just went through. It's not just this one.
Right,
What-
we're gonna rename all the RA, RE, RR, everything has to get a new name. Is that right? Either that or we rename it here.
Tim, what is your motion?
To accept staff's recommendation to have
Okay.
a different acronym for the zoning code versus land use.
Okay. And
At the risk, Madam Chair, of really just getting yelled at by Andy later, there's no legal requirement to have an acronym for your general plan designations. So if we're really high-centered on this and you really love the ones in your zoning code, we can do that. We all use them in shorthand, but there's no requirement. But
Well, then you can't read the zoning map, right?
Right.
Isn't that the problem with it?
no, you can read the maps. That's what we have color for.
Yeah, but everyone prints it out in black and white, and so you can't see the RA versus BP, you know?
I prefer
I'm
the
going to say as a
acronyms.
matter of interpretation
For
down the
acronyms
line,
too,
we would
but I
really
want-
like to have acronyms to refer to these.
Yeah,
And
I
is-
prefer
I just
acronyms.
wanted to be transparent. There's no requirement to have these things.
okay, hold
Okay.
on a second. I want to hear Andreas. What did you say? I'm sorry,
I
Andreas.
said that as a matter of interpretation down the line and clarity down the line, because the convention in this space is to have acronyms for these. I think we should stick with acronyms. I don't think we should just use the words.
Okay.
If we
So-
have have a whole new set of names. My preference would be that we keep the ones that are in the zoning ordinance, and if we have to rename something, rename this set, because they don't get used nearly as much as the other ones.
Okay, so then that would mean we would need to have a list of what the zoning is. So we would be the opposite and come up with a different name. What is the committee? I know Tim's motion says that he wants to have, sticking with the staff's requirement of changing.
We
But I
can
feel
clarify
like-
my recommendation, since Mark and I think Andreas may differ, so.
I feel like we're spinning and around in a
Why don't
circle.
you tally and see what people say with Mark's motion?
I didn't hear Mark. I didn't hear conflict with Mark. Mark just clarified that it's not required by law to have acronyms, but I didn't hear a recommendation from Mark. I'm happy to listen to Mark's recommendation on this item also. But right now there's a motion on the table, and we can hold it until there's further discussion if that's the will of the committee. But at this point, there's a motion on the table.
Is there a second so far?
Not yet, to adopt Andrew's recommendation. And if you want to clarify that recommendation, Andy, then please do.
And the recommendation is that the land use designation acronyms are different than the zoning code districts.
Okay.
So you're not saying which one has to change?
No, I'm not. Just so that they're different, and when we're having discussions, we know immediately what the difference is that we're having a discussion about. Because actually, you just made it really clear why there has been so much confusion when we've had discussions about zoning in the general plan, because many of them do have exactly the same designation, and people think I may be talking land use and you're talking zoning, and they're different. So anyway, so Tim, the recommendation is the land use designation acronyms differ from the zoning code districts acronyms.
Okay.
And that affects like 7 out of the 10 definitions.
No, all of them.
Not all, some of them are different. Like right now, this general commercial is shown as GC, whereas our zoning is called CG. So some of them are different, but most of them are not. Most of them are the same. I second the motion.
There's a table in the code that references the zoning district to the general plan designations. Would it help if I shared that image?
Yes.
Okay, hang on.
Thank you, Christy.
Sure.
You are such a wealth of information.
Make sure I'm sharing the right thing. Okay, can you see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So you'll see that there are some general plan designations there's 2 that have one single zoning district associated with them. And then you'll see a lot of them are the same, but then the commercial is probably where you have the biggest difference.
So we only have one place, the RS, that has more than one designation.
Oh, that's interesting that you have 2 land use designations and only 1 zoning. That's not right.
Well, what's interesting is you have the medium density residential zoning district, RM, corresponding to the medium high density, which would be the RMH.
Ooh. Okay. Oops.
But again, don't get lost in the weeds. This is out of the zoning code.
Right.
And
So it's just philosophy of how you want these treated. That's all. That's really the discussion.
So one of the, I mean, I just actually saw another town or city that actually their zoning districts are numbered. So it'd be, you know, R1, R2, R3, R4 versus, you know, our general plan would maybe be able to stay the same and then changing, I don't know, changing the zoning. I don't know. But there's a motion and a second. So I guess we have to do a vote.
Ready for a roll call on that?
This is Bonnie. I just wanted a question. So if I understand correctly, the motion is that we have a different land use designation acronym than the zoning acronym. But from the chart that I saw, essentially we're changing almost everything. Is that correct? Because there were so many that had the same.
You would be either changing the zoning or the land use. So one of those would, yes.
Okay. And okay.
So it's a substantial change, yes.
Right. Thanks.
I am honestly not ready to vote either way, personally. I am pretty conflicted. I don't even know how to vote for me personally, so.
Well, maybe if Anders would give us a little more context of why. I mean, I think he rushed upon why we ought to, but can you give us maybe an anecdotal example, Anders, to why this might how this could come into play in the future?
I think Anders froze.
That's just
No, I think he's just thinking really deeply.
There he is.
You're muted, Anders. Unmute so we can hear your wisdom.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having internet issues tonight. The last I heard, you were conflicted and were you taking the vote?
Yeah, I don't, can you explain, I mean, with this motion, we're basically saying the staff will then be coming up with the new designations for these general plan land use. So, I mean, I personally I'm too conflicted to make a vote, to be honest. I understand that it's important to have them different, but my problem is do we keep the general plan designations as they are, and they have been for the last 20 years, and then we change the zoning so that it makes that a little bit more easy? To me, that seems more reasonable.
This is Sean. From my perspective, I don't know why we would be changing general plan land use designations when that's what controls, and why we wouldn't change the zoning designations when we get around to updating the zoning code. I think from an implementation standpoint, if we're looking at somebody that comes to the counter and wants to build something on a property in town, most people don't talk about land use designation, talk about zoning designations. They don't make the distinction between the two. And so if they're the same, it's just unnecessarily complicated and confusing. I don't know why we would have them be the same. I've never seen a city that has them the same, frankly. And I don't know why we would change the general plan designations as opposed to the zoning designations when the zoning follows the general plan.
But I would say you're correct that people come and they don't ask you about land use designation. They come and ask you about the zoning. And in 20 years on the planning commission, I can't recall anybody calling me up or accosting me on, after a meeting and asking me a land use designation question. They always ask the zoning designation questions, which is why I would favor leaving those pretty much the way they are if we're going to have to change something, because nobody looks at the land use designations anyway, unless maybe it's legally or something, but the people who come in and use it, I guess besides the lawyers, are looking at the zoning code, and they want something that makes sense and is easy for them to remember. And
I think it's the tail wagging the dog. Because if you're the general plan land use committee, you're not the zoning committee, right? And so it seems to me like, why would you change the general plan land use designations that are already in existence, we've had for 20 years, and we're not really changing a whole lot other else to fit the zoning code that's going to end up coming at the end of this whole process?
And when you're talking about the counter, Gene, when the people are coming in to talk,
yes,
if the everyday language that I'm talking to somebody is the zoning plan, that's a really easy change. And when I look at all the legal problems that have happened, it's because the inconsistency between the two. And I think that if, say, me at the counter, if my familiarity is, okay, this is where our land use designation is, I think the most important thing that people come to sue us for is because of our inconsistencies between the two. It's not that difficult for, if you're at the front counter or you're talking to somebody, all you're doing is you're just pulling up a zoning table. We've done that several times tonight, talking about animal keeping or something like that. And it's a really easy thing to reference until we get used to the acronym change. But when you're talking about that muscle memory of what we've used for 20 years, I think I agree with Sean that the muscle memory is where we can get ourselves into trouble. When we're at the counter, we're looking at books, we're pulling out the zoning code, we're saying, okay, well, this is this. And through this process, we will have made sure that the zoning code that we're looking up is consistent with the general plan. Just because I call it a CG at the counter, when I'm looking at a table, if that table is consistent with the general plan that all of us are really, really accustomed to, it's going to keep us out of a lot of trouble.
And from a just like practical standpoint, if we start changing land use designations now, the acronyms and the titles now, it's going to feed through all kinds of stuff with the general plan that we're trying to get updated, whereas opposed to the zoning is at the end of the process. So, I mean,
Well, it sounds like when the motion says it's staff recommendation, it sounds like the staff is kind of not in an agreement in a sense. Mary Beth?
Bonnie has her hand raised.
Bonnie?
Sorry, I was going to see if maybe now would be a good time to make a motion that we leave the land use designations in the general plan and that we allow staff to change the zoning designation so that it would decrease confusion and conflicts.
And how does it work with a motion ahead of time and a second motion? I need direction.
Oh.
One of the motions needs to call for a roll call vote, see if it passes.
Okay, so let's do roll call for the first motion.
So my reading of the first motion is that we are, staff recommendations is that the zoning code acronyms differ from the land use acronyms.
That's correct. That's the motion that I put on the table. And there's a second out there.
Yeah,
so these are also not inconsistent. So we can vote on Tim's motion first, and if that passes, then Bonnie's motion will also make sense. And that's basically a refinement of what Tim is looking for.
Yeah, because it's almost saying the same thing, except with a little bit more definition.
It puts more specificity on it. So it's not like these are
Actually,
incompatible with one another.
I am.
Hang on. Since it's my motion, I actually like Bonnie's better.
Excellent.
So what I'd like to do is withdraw mine.
Thank you, Tim.
Perfect. Even easier.
And second Bonnie's.
I appreciate that.
So Bonnie, can you reread yours for me, please?
Oh dear. So I move that we leave the land use designations in the general plan as is, and that we allow staff to change the zoning designations so that they're different and minimize any confusion.
And if I,
would prefer-
and if
I
I
would
could just
prefer-
add, like, next time we have our meeting, the next meeting, if we could see the language on that.
I would prefer that we say the staff recommend rather than go ahead and change. I'd like to
Okay.
see, I mean, it's not that I don't
Well, the
trust.
staff doesn't have
but
the
I
power to
think-
update the zoning code, so there's no risk of staff actually going and doing this. This is really a motion to not change anything from what we have and to basically recommend as an implementation measure to change the zoning code designations when we get there.
Bonnie's language was changed, that the staff would change it. That's all. I would say that they should recommend or something like that.
Is that okay with you?
I would
Bonnie?
like to change that. Yeah, I like Jean's suggestions.
Okay,
All
pull
right.
that together. Pull that together for me.
We've
You talking to me?
Somebody.
Right.
la-di-la-di-da.
All right. So I move that we leave the land use designations as is, and that staff will recommend zoning designations that will be different but allow more or decrease confusion between the two.
I second that, Underco.
All right, roll call.
Okay, just a second, I'm writing just a second. Okay. Jan Clark Kretz,
Yes.
Bonnie London,
Yes.
Tim Underko,
Aye.
Jean Wilson,
Yes,
Beth Cohen,
Yes.
and Randy is out, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
We're good.
Is that correct there, the way I have that written?
You need to share your screen, Mark.
You share your screen, put it in
I
a chat
bumped
or
you
something.
out.
How did I get kicked out? That's
I
weird.
think I kicked you out.
Christy did it.
Wow, such an hour. I wonder, I wrote it up there.
what are we looking at?
Right, where it says author, correct?
Yes. Is that it?
Motion carried 5-0.
Cool. All right, so we're done with that. Now down to town center commercial.
This is Bonnie. The only thing I might add though is to include entertainment, just because that seems to be the way that a lot of commercial use is going.
I have no objection to that.
Anybody else? Objection to that? Sounds good.
Okay. Tourist destination commercial.
So I have a comment on that tourist destination commercial.
Go for it, Ramona.
Question I have is, why is office business park in there? Not quite sure how an office business park could relate to something that would be a tourist commercial destination.
Jean, do you?
Trying to remember exactly how it is, but in that description of it that we talked about in the Southeast land use meeting, It describes the area near Horseshoe Bar as having the main commercial and the more tourist destination. And then as you get down further toward Brace, that it should be basically less busy as far as, commercial hub kind of thing. And so to be kind of like quieter as you get down toward Brace in order to preserve the residential area on Brace, the, what did it call, the rural corridor. So it was kind of intensity of uses gets less, and that was probably why the office part was in there. And it says the tourist part is supposed to be at Horseshoe Bar and then goes down to the more local oriented businesses or whatever, or as you get away from the main hub there at Horseshoe Bar.
Okay, that's true. I remember that was around Martin and Betty Lane. And so I guess the question I have is then, I mean, what is to prevent Office Business Park from going into basically Turtle Island, the rest of the tourist destination that fronts Horseshoe Bar? And is that something that we really want to consider? Or is that something that we would not want to consider, is to have Office Business Park fronting along Horseshoe Bar?
I think that's where that, what is it called? Specific area designation explains more of that.
Yeah, the subcommittee actually has more of that, because what's in your current general plan is this. Doesn't actually explain much.
What, not this part, Mark, but look under the specific uses part.
Down here?
Yeah, which is, it's in a different spot.
Yeah, that's probably a difficulty right there then, isn't it? You need to have it in one spot.
There's a whole, like 5 different places that have specific, it's like,
Let me see if I can find it.
I don't want to get too high centered on that. If we want to include more specificity, that's
we've got like 5 different areas that have the specific description.
What you're talking.
Yes, that's the spot.
Right. Let's see. Here we go, right there. And right now, the committee is going through this, the subcommittee. Here.
See, point B there is the one that says along the interchange, that it's concentrating the commercial traveler, and then uses on the site transition to more locally oriented commercial and office uses. I don't know if I like business park being there. That seems to, well, I don't know. Our business park has a whole definition. Basically, it's a campus look. I suppose it wouldn't hurt. It gives me an impression of something bigger than maybe what was in. I don't know. That, I guess it's okay. Might be looked at though.
I mean, that's where I kind of looked at when I read it, that seems something larger, that the majority of the development could potentially be business park on commercial or tourist destination. So that's where it kind of hit me as being odd that, are you talking tourist commercial, or, is business park?
I think we're talking both. But both tourist commercial and going down to less intense kinds of more locally oriented places.
Mark, I have a quick question for you, and I see Tim's hands up too. But since there is this whole almost page designated towards this land use. Is it appropriate to move all that or to preface that?
Just definition.
Okay.
This will, there, all the other stuff that you saw there is being discussed by that subcommittee, and the results of that will be folded into the general plan.
But I guess what I'm saying is we are looking at these designations.
Mhm.
Should we somehow, come up with a summary of what this says once the subcommittee comes up with their
If the
with their
subcommittee recommends a change to the definition, then certainly we should do that. But the policies that go in that will go into the narrative that will have a photograph of the area, a map overlooking the area, and then specific policies that deal with it. And then, if nothing else, we could cross-reference. But I really, really am, this is a hill that I would die on. Let's not spread this stuff all over your general plan like it is now. Let's make it so that you go to one spot. This happens to be the definitions for the land use designation. When we're going to talk about policies about how we want it divided or set up, let's do that where it's appropriate in the land use. But
Tim, go ahead, Tim.
That's a good point, Mark. Thank you. Can I don't have a land use map in front of me, but can staff give us an idea of what like large parcels around town have this zoning or this land use, the TD? What is TD? Is Turtle Island TD?
Yes.
Yes.
And
it goes all the way from all the way down to Brace Road.
Okay.
Give me 2 shakes. I'll pull it up here.
It goes from north of Horseshoe Bar Road all the way south of Horseshoe Bar Road to Brace.
Okay. So in lodging, what is lodging considered hotel also?
Yes,
It is.
yes.
Okay. Which is also like bed and breakfast.
I suppose it could be, but I don't think that was what the intent was when it was brought up.
Mm-hmm.
That was stupid.
We do have B&B in our, but I don't recall like where all it's allowed. I know RA can have a B&B.
So here's the TD.
Mm-hmm. All right.
The last subcommittee meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion about the narrative that we just looked at that talked about limiting limits access to Brace Road, which is kind of difficult for some of the uses that are already there.
I really believe that this section should be given some very broad, like allowable uses, just because of where it's strategically located and how significant it is to the town and how long it's been in the plan to do something there. And so I mean, as far as commercial uses, I think that we should have very broad commercial uses out of that area. And it looks like there is in this by definition here, right?
Mark, make a note that we're going to be waiting for the South of I-80 committee to give us recommendations. So my thought is bring up Tim's comments to the committee and have them discuss that.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
And then, Mark, can you also note that this section is covered in another section and that we want to bring them all together?
It's covered in the specific, whatever that's called.
In the description. Well, there's a narrative that Mark has put together for that general planning area that will come into the general plan. So that's where that is, Jean.
So what I guess I'm saying is there's a section in the general plan called policies for specific areas.
Correct.
We need to move all the policies for specific areas after they get fine-tuned and put them over here.
Correct.
Okay, that's I'd like a note so that we can remember to talk about that.
Bonnie?
The policies here.
Hi. So I'd like to eliminate the park out of the office/business, just because again, I agree with everyone when they said that that connotates like a large area as opposed to just a mixture of, a couple of offices here and there.
Okay, let's see what the rest of the committee said. And I mean, business park is definitely, I think, different. So anybody disagree with that?
I think
Okay.
if somebody wants to put something like a smaller business park, they probably could do it without our telling them specifically. They could put a larger office complex without, we do have a definition of business park, or maybe it's in the specific, those specific designations. There's more written about business park to give us an idea of what we were talking about, or maybe it was here.
Yeah, no, there is business park.
It's here.
The current glossary does not have a definition for business park.
You're correct. I was thinking of the second paragraph here that describes more what it's meant by it.
Mhm.
The one that we can't see right now.
Yeah, I mean, my 2 cents on that is I prefer that if we're going to allow business, that we not use business park, because that is a specific land use designation. So
Does anybody disagree with that? Let's take it out then.
boom, done. Any other changes in that section?
Would we be asking for trouble if we said entertainment?
I think that's,
It looks like it's in there already.
Oh,
It says
okay.
lo-
It says local serving. Do we need that?
Why do we need to say local serving? What
What does that mean?
It means a local bar and not,
Oh, okay.
Means
Like a-
something that
Like a
serves
local card
them as-
room rather than a big casino, right?
Yeah.
I don't, yeah.
do we want it to say local serving?
I'm okay with getting rid of local serving. That just doesn't, yeah, I would say like, we probably want to broaden it up a little bit. I mean,
It also seems to kind of run counter to the tourist destination part of the tourist destination commercial.
True.
Andreas, what was that?
Having something that says local serving in a designation that's called tourist destination seems a little contradictory.
Okay.
yeah.
You're
So I
saying,
support getting rid of local serving.
does anybody disagree with that? Okay, let's take that out then.
Done. You good?
Yeah, looks good. It's cleaned up.
Now, this may actually be one of those land use designations that we'll go ahead and define and then set aside, because we only have one spot in town that has this land use designation on it. And that committee has decided that that land use designation probably won't stay.
What property is that, Mark?
The piece, it's the triangle piece just on the other side of the railroad tracks. Let's see if I
the
can.
currently designated business park that's landlocked.
Yeah, there's
Oh,
only
okay.
have the full general. I can show you where it is.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's off of Taylor. And, well, it's hard. You can't get to it from Taylor, but it's just on the other side.
It's right there. So anyway, that doesn't mean we shouldn't define it, and the town may decide to add a business park later on. But
Can you mark a little note in there as to why it's all marked out and the thought process kind of quickly?
well, this part's marked out because it basically is narrative on where it is on the map. And this is just left. The only thing that we're recommending you add is that you have a limitation here so we don't end up with a bunch of warehouses where we did not want warehouses.
What, did you add something?
Right here.
That's a, you know, I got to say, when I read that sentence, it's a little ambiguous. You know, if this is the time, I think a little more clarification on that line would be a little just helpful. So warehouses or fulfillment centers greater than,
Whatever, pick a number.
yeah,
This-
40, but are those, what is that? I mean, is that like the size of a structure?
Yes.
A size of a standalone structure?
Yes. And those are-
Okay.
That's a small number.
Right. Right. But then what if it's like a campus style where like, you know, they occupy more than 2 buildings, right? But it's also one single center. I just don't like limiting like that to that degree. I don't know. I'm trying to collect my thoughts here. Maybe anybody else have any thoughts on that?
This is Bonnie. The way that I kind of read it though is they're trying to make the distinction between a business park, which would have like professional offices versus maybe something industrial oriented, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way I kind of take from it.
Yeah, the kind of use, it's like warehouse use and fulfillment use. Yeah, I follow you there.
And we don't even have to limit, we can just say warehouses and fulfillment centers. But the thing that Andy and I kicked back and forth was, it's entirely reasonable to have an office park, if you will, that might have a small warehouse or have a small fulfillment.
Right.
Reasonable.
But maybe not Amazon.
Yeah, but not something at 3 million square feet or
Oh yeah, we definitely want to put a limit on it, I guess. But I mean,
this was intended to engender the kind of discussion that's going on. So
yeah.
Why don't you just take out? Why don't you just say large fulfillment centers are not envisioned in this designation? That way warehouses are okay. Large fulfillment centers like Amazon, like an Amazon building, is not okay.
Probably want to put a square footage limit on it then, if you're saying large, because large is, you know, loose, you know, it's subjective. So like, you know, what is that? Like nothing more than 100,000 square feet? Because, right, that would be considered large, would be millions.
Yeah, right.
But what is large is the question, right?
Costco's 152,000 square feet, so it kind of gives you.
Is that large? Is that large?
I wouldn't consider that large.
You would?
Yeah.
You would?
No, I would not. I mean, for something like that, if you're talking about a warehouse, I mean, I wouldn't, looking at the size of the Costco building and the lot that it's on, I wouldn't consider that large. But I also, I'm obviously supportive of Costco, so.
It's relative, right?
Looking like a true town manager.
It's relative because there's 300,000 square foot, you know, standalone buildings out there in Sacramento and like other places, right? So those are considered large. There's million square footers, which is large in my opinion, but it's all relative, I guess. I think we would probably want to be a little more specific on the actual amount.
There's really 2 policy questions here for the committee to think about. The first is this an okay restriction on business park? You not want fulfillment centers or warehouses. And then if you are okay with not specifically eliminating them, then we can throw a number out there and we can be precise about it, or we can be nebulous. It is a little vague right here. But I think that's okay at the general plan level.
Yeah, your zoning could tie this down further.
And we could go with Sean's idea and just say, and just do this, just delete that and just say they're not allowed, they're not envisioned in this designation, and let the zoning take care of the size.
You know, the tough part for me though is that because we've eliminated where that original location was supposed to be and we don't have a location identified, I mean, I think that that's actually kind of fundamental because it depends on if is it near residential, where exactly is it going to go? So I kind of like your original suggestion, which is maybe to table it until we have a business park identified.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is, do you even want business park in your general plan if you're taking the right, the only piece that's we just
yeah.
put it together.
Yeah, I have a question about that too. Why are we defining it if we don't have
We may
something
not-
that we're looking at?
Yeah, I agree. It seems to me that we should see what flushes out and see if we even have a business park. And then once we do, we'll come back and define it.
But that would have to be done by an amendment, right? Like a general plan amendment.
No,
this,
I mean,
this is all
if-
coming back to you from the CR College Committee will be making a recommendation.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You guys are going to get a couple of bites at this apple.
Yeah, okay, good. Let's come back to that. For the record, I'd like to keep it in there. I'd like to keep our options open. I think it's important that we don't restrict, what future opportunities might be out there. We want to allow ourselves to be able to take advantage of opportunities if we want them. And if we don't, we want to be able to at least have the opportunity to take a chance. So I think by keeping it in there, like, it keeps doors open for us.
We might be able to put in the zoning, if we don't want to list warehouses and fulfillment centers here, we might be able in the zoning, I'm thinking, to allow something that would be related to a business, but isn't strictly, that isn't their main business. There isn't being a warehouse, but it's being a business, but they need somewhere space.
Mm-hmm.
But then we're kind of almost getting to where what we really are putting in our light industrial area.
Yeah, just be wary of that. I just came back from the Inland Empire, and then along the 60 in the Inland Empire, there's something called Skechers that I think you can see from the moon. And what they've done is they have a little retail spot that literally is like a postage stamp on an aircraft carrier. I mean, it's so tiny, but that's how they got around certain provisions. So yes, we'll have to very carefully craft that, Gene, but you are correct. We can refine that in the zoning code.
Mark, can you put that in there? That thought that you just had, what you just said? So we don't.
Be wary of Skechers.
Yeah. So
No.
it was a distribution center with a small retail attached to it, Mark? Is that what it was?
Yes, exactly. Now, if you talk to the city manager of that town, they love it.
Yeah, I wonder what the revenue's like.
Yeah, I was going to say it's an ATM machine, but anyway, I'll move on. Okay, so this will come back from the Sierra College Committee. I don't believe they've fully acted on this, but that was where they were headed last time we were doing this.
Yeah, and folks, it's 9 o'clock, so I think this is a good place to stop.
Don't they have? Well, I guess we do have. That's
Yeah, we have
We
all
have a
that
lot
stuff.
to go through.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, it's late. So if anybody disagrees, is it okay if we mark that spot and pick it up next time? And then when would next time be?
From our last meeting till this meeting, we had 2 weeks, almost. If you care to go another 2 weeks weekly, since we're just kind of picking up where we left off, we can continue this meeting. 2 weeks would be October 5th.
I feel like, at least for me, there's so much going on with the subcommittees and also this committee. It felt a little rushed at this committee, just me talking, but I mean, I would like to hear what everybody else thinks. Do you want to meet in 2 weeks, everybody, or do you want to meet in a month, or?
I can also add, this is the umbrella land use committee, and your next regular meeting would be scheduled for Thursday, October 7th at 3 o'clock.
Well, I think that would be the perfect time we meet again then. Is that all right with everybody else?
Yes.
You just, okay.
Try my best to make it.
Yeah, I will not be able to be making it. We have the redistricting hearing that night.
It's this would be at 3 o'clock.
It goes from 10 to 6.
Ah, okay.
It's going to be a long day.
Oh my goodness, Anders.
So if we go back to October 5th, which is Tuesday, we could begin at 3 o'clock.
But you know, keep it there. Keep it there. Maybe I can get it over with.
I cannot do the 5th.
How many other subcommittees are meeting that week? I'm finding I end up with so many subcommittee meetings, and that's just me, and we got staff that have to go to all these things too, and all the consultants that have. What else is going on that week?
We have 5 subcommittees left. We have 5 subcommittees left. So we have 5 committees left. We have Parks and Recreation, then we have this committee, the Land Use, then we have Sierra College, we have south of Interstate 80, and the Business Corridor. So I'm hoping we have a couple of those coming up this week. So I'm hoping we can wrap those up.
And we have none of those scheduled that particular week.
Correct. The week of October 4th is clear of committee meetings, other than the regularly scheduled 3 o'clock Land Use Committee on the 7th.
And it's also, we do not have a planning commission or a town council meeting that week. So that's
Correct.
actually a pretty good week for us to put it in there to a slot that fits. What day did you say you could not make, Mark?
Tuesday.
Okay.
And Anders can't make the 7th. What does the 6th look like?
The 6th is available.
The 6th is Leadership Loomis and a couple of other things.
Okay.
And then I am out for my daughter's wedding after that.
Oh. What?
Megan's getting married.
So there's also Monday, the 4th.
I can see Monday.
That's awesome, Jan.
Thank you. Yeah, 4th works for me. Does the 4th work for everybody else?
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Try my best.
Those
All
are
right.
probably better for me.
Monday, October 4th, 3 p.m. or 6 p.m.?
I would say I can't join until after 3:30.
6 p.m. would be better for me too, just because of carpooling.
6 p.m. works for me. Does it 6 p.m. not work for anybody on the 4th?
Try my best.
All right.
It doesn't use it. I can do it. I don't like the 6 o'clock. They're mess too many other things up, but I can do it.
Also, would anybody entertain ending at 9 o'clock? So it would be a 3-hour meeting versus a 2-hour meeting, or is 3 too much and you want to hold it to 2? So how many for 6 to 8?
I think 3 hours tends to get a little bit difficult because then we start getting tired and non-productive. I would vote for 2 hours.
Second.
Okay. Everybody agree 2 hours?
Sounds good.
2 hours on the 4th.
Monday, October 4th, 6 to 8.
Correct.
We'll try to talk faster, Mark.
You're winning. I mean, these are the tough things. These are the ones that come back. So I'm glad that the committee's digging in and
Yeah,
this is the hard work.
Yeah, it's been strong work. Thanks, everybody. So,
Good muscle.
okay, we'll see you all on October 4th at 6 o'clock, 6 to 8.
Thank
night.
you.
Okay, bye. Adjourned.
Thanks.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.